Welcome to the SafeSimpleSound podcast, where we believe that financial clarity shouldn't be reserved for the ultra wealthy, nor should it require a degree in economics to understand. It should be safe, it should be simple, and it should be sound. In today's episode, we are exploring a universal source of anxiety, the retirement calculator. We're discussing this today because we recently published a written piece on this exact topic titled Retirement Reality Check: Why Accurate Assumptions Matter More Than the Math. We wrote it because we observed a pattern in the families we serve, a specific type of paralysis that happens when people sit down to plan their future. Whether you are 10 years away from retirement and feeling behind, or you're already retired and worried about market volatility, this episode will give you the foundational tools to replace panic with purpose. We are going to show you how our S3 approach shifts the focus from terrifying magic numbers to empowering life inputs. Let's start with a common experience. You decide it's time to get serious about planning. You go online, find a retirement calculator, and punch in a few numbers. You press enter, and you stare at a result that looks more like a phone number than a bank account balance. The immediate reaction is usually one of two extremes. First, there's panic. You think, I need to save every single penny I earn or I'm going to be destitute. Or there's the second reaction, avoidance. You think, I'll never get to that number. It's impossible. So why even try? This is the classic financial contradiction our team sees constantly. The dilemma between saving everything possible out of fear versus ignoring the problem out of paralysis. At SafeSimpleSound, drawing from our framework, we believe there's a both-and solution. You don't have to choose between panic and paralysis. The safety of your retirement plan, the safe in SafeSimpleSound, doesn't come from a complex formula or an impossibly high savings target. It comes from the accuracy of your assumptions. By defining your life inputs first, things like inflation, longevity, and returns, you replace the fear of the unknown with the security of a vision-first direction. Today, we are going to dismantle the myth of the magic number and teach you how to build a foundation that can withstand the weight of real life. Let's begin by addressing the elephant in the room, the financial industry's obsession with the number. You have likely seen the commercials. They usually involve people walking around with giant orange numbers under their arms, asking, "What's your number?" It is a brilliant piece of marketing, but from our perspective at SafeSimpleSound, it is a dangerous piece of financial advice. Why do we say that? Because a single number devoid of context creates fragility. It is not sound. If your number is $2 million, what does that actually mean? Does that number assume you live to age 85 or age 100? Does it assume the cost of bread and milk stays the same, or does it account for inflation? Does it assume you want to leave $1 million to your children, or does it assume you want to spend your last dollar on your last day? Without accurate assumptions, the math is just sophisticated guessing, and sophisticated guessing does not provide sleep-at-night security. Through our S3 framework development, we advocate for a foundation-first approach. This aligns with the principle of vision-first direction. A safe plan isn't about hitting a high score in a video game. It's about building a foundation that supports your specific vision of the future. To do this, we must address what our team calls the big three variables. These are the inputs that actually drive the success or failure of a plan. Small shifts in these assumptions create massive ripples over a 30-year retirement. Let's break these down, applying our simple filter to translate the industry jargon. The first variable is inflation. We call this the silent eroder. Inflation is like rust on your retirement savings. You don't see it happen day to day, but over 20 years, it can eat through the structural integrity of your purchasing power. The historical average for inflation is generally cited around 3%. However, through our practice, we've observed that personal inflation for retirees is often higher. Retirees spend money on different things than the average worker, specifically healthcare and travel, sectors where costs often rise faster than the price of a gallon of milk. So, what is the SafeSimpleSound approach here? We recommend stress testing your plan. Instead of hoping for the best, we assume inflation might be 3.5% or even 4.0%. It is safer to assume life will get expensive and be pleasantly surprised than to assume life will remain cheap and run out of money. This provides a margin of safety, a buffer that protects your peace of mind. The second variable is the real rate of return. We call this the growth engine. Now, real rate of return is a technical term, but let's make it simple. This is what your money earns after inflation and after taxes. If the market goes up 10%, but inflation is 4% and taxes take another 2%, your real return, what you can actually buy groceries with, is much lower. The S3 standard here is grounded in being a trustworthy tortoise. We believe you should be a pessimist in planning, so you can be an optimist in living. Many online calculators default to aggressive growth rates, assuming the stock market will always boom. But based on our framework development, we prefer to assume a conservative 4 to 5% real return. Why? Because this provides a buffer against market volatility. If the market performs better than that, excellent, that is a bonus. It means an extra trip to see the grandkids or a donation to your favorite charity. But we never want excellent market performance to be a requirement for your survival. That is the definition of fragility. The third and perhaps most complex variable is longevity. We call this the ultimate variable. This can be an uncomfortable topic, but planning requires us to face reality. Planning to live to age 95 or 100 often feels optimistic to our clients. They might say, "Oh, no one in my family lives that long." But financially speaking, assuming a long life is actually the conservative stance. Think about it this way. The greatest risk in retirement isn't dying too soon. Financially speaking, the greatest risk is living longer than your money lasts. Drawing from our CFC background at SafeSimpleSound, we always plan for the risk of a long life. It is far better to leave an inheritance you didn't plan for because you passed away at 85 than to run out of money at age 88 and live to be 98. By planning for longevity, we ensure that the sound aspect of your plan remains intact, regardless of your lifespan. Now, once we have these inputs, inflation, return, and longevity, we have to define the model itself. This brings us to a critical both-and opportunity regarding your legacy versus your lifestyle. Most plans fail because they don't know what the money is for. There are generally two models. One, the capital preservation model. This is focused on legacy. In this model, you live only on the interest or growth. You never touch the principal, so that the main bucket of money remains intact to be passed down to heirs. The pro is maximum safety and a large legacy. The con is that it requires significantly more capital, often double the amount, to generate enough income. 2. The purchasing power preservation model. This is focused on lifestyle. Here, you spend both the growth and the principal over time. The goal is to maintain your standard of living, your purchasing power, until the end of the plan, say age 100. The pro is that it is highly efficient. It requires less capital to enjoy the same lifestyle. The con is that if you live past the plan's end date, you run out of money. This sounds like a strict either-or choice, doesn't it? Either I leave money to my kids or I enjoy my retirement. But the SafeSimpleSound philosophy seeks the both and. Through our practice, we often build a purchasing power plan for lifestyle needs, ensuring you have the cash flow to enjoy life, and layer a separate capital preservation strategy, such as life insurance, for legacy goals. This allows you to spend your assets with confidence, knowing the legacy is secured through a different tool. When you understand these inputs, the magic number stops being scary. It just becomes a math result based on choices you have made. To illustrate how these principles work in practice, let me share a hypothetical scenario that demonstrates the difference between math-based panic and assumption-based clarity. Please note, while this story is created for educational purposes to illustrate our S3 framework, it demonstrates patterns and behaviors we frequently observe when families begin the financial planning process. Let's imagine a fictional couple. Let's call them Marcus and Sarah. Marcus and Sarah are both 58 years old. They have been diligent savers their whole lives. They have accumulated a nest egg of $1.5 million. In many circles, they would be considered millionaires next door. They are disciplined and responsible, very much aligned with the sound principle of stewardship. However, Marcus recently read a financial news article suggesting that to retire comfortably today, a couple needs $3 million. He went online, found a generic retirement calculator, plugged in his current savings, and the screen flashed red. According to the calculator's default settings, Marcus and Sarah were failing. This triggered the SAFE violation in their lives. Marcus entered a state of anxiety. He told Sarah they needed to cancel their planned anniversary trip. He started talking about working until he was 75. He moved into a scarcity mindset. Sarah, on the other hand, felt paralyzed. She felt that if they hadn't made it by now, they never would, so she wanted to ignore the statements entirely. This is the scenario, a contradiction between their diligent history and their current fear. Now, let's apply the SafeSimpleSound framework to this hypothetical situation. If our team were reviewing this scenario, we wouldn't start by looking at the $1.5 million or the $3 million. We would start by looking at the assumptions Marcus put into that calculator. In this hypothetical example, let's say the calculator Marcus used had a default inflation assumption of 2%, which is low, but it also assumed a capital preservation model. It assumed Marcus and Sarah wanted to die with $3 million in the bank to leave to their children. But Marcus and Sarah hadn't actually discussed that. Through our S3 practice, we would guide a couple like Marcus and Sarah to define their inputs first. We would ask, Marcus, Sarah, what is the money for? Let's imagine Sarah says, we don't need to leave a massive inheritance. We educated our children debt-free. That was our gift to them. We want to ensure we don't become a burden to them, but we want to enjoy the fruits of our labor. This is a massive shift. This moves them from a capital preservation model, where they need to save that $3 million principal, to a purchasing power preservation model, where they can spend down their assets over time. Next, we look at the inputs. Let's assume we run the numbers using S3 standards. We set inflation at a conservative 3.5% to be safe. We set the investment return at a humble 5% to be sound. We set their longevity to age 98. When we change the model from hoarding principal to spending down assets, that terrifying $3 million requirement drops significantly. In this hypothetical scenario, it might turn out that their $1.5 million, when combined with Social Security, is actually perfectly adequate to support their lifestyle until age 98, provided they are willing to spend the principal down. Suddenly, the panic dissipates. The math didn't change. They still have $1.5 million. The market didn't change. What changed were the assumptions. By clarifying that they didn't need a legacy model, they freed themselves from the burden of accumulating unnecessary capital. Furthermore, let's say Marcus is still worried about the what-ifs. What if we live to 105? This is where the both-and solution comes in. Instead of forcing them to work 5 more years to save cash, a SafeSimpleSound approach might suggest using a small portion of their assets to purchase a longevity annuity, essentially insurance against living too long. This creates a floor of income that kicks in at age 85, guaranteeing they can't outlive their money. While the story of Marcus and Sarah is fictional, it demonstrates how our framework functions. Notice what happened here. We didn't solve their problem by finding a hot stock that returns 12%. That would violate the SAFE principle by introducing unnecessary risk. We didn't solve it by telling them to live on rice and beans. That violates the sound principle of enjoying the life you've built. We solved it by adjusting the lens through which they viewed their money. This example shows patterns we observe when families clarify their vision. The magic number is a cage. Accurate assumptions are the key to the lock. Whether you are facing this exact situation or something similar, the lesson holds true. Your anxiety often stems from trying to hit a target you haven't actually defined. When you define the target, when you set the inputs based on your values, not the bank's default settings, the path becomes clear. This aligns with the principle of vision-first direction. The math serves the vision, not the other way around. As we bring this episode to a close, let's summarize the insights we've covered today. We started with the challenge, the paralysis caused by the magic number and the fear-based marketing of the financial industry. We identified that the traditional either-or dilemma, save everything in panic or do nothing in avoidance, is a false choice. We offered the SafeSimpleSound both-and solution. Focus on the inputs, not the output. Remember the big 3 assumptions. 1. Inflation, the silent eroder. Be safer by assuming life will get more expensive. 2. Real rate of return, the growth engine. Be a pessimist in planning using conservative returns so you can be an optimist in living. 3. Longevity, the ultimate variable. Plan for the risk of a long life so you never become a burden. And finally, we discussed the importance of choosing your model. Are you trying to preserve capital for a legacy or preserve purchasing power for a lifestyle? Knowing the answer to that question can cut your required number in half and restore your peace of mind immediately. So, what is your next step? If you are listening to this and feeling that familiar tightness in your chest about retirement planning, we invite you to stop. Don't open a calculator yet. Don't look at your balance and panic. First, define the variables that matter. Sit down with your spouse or a trusted partner and ask, what is this money for? Do we need a legacy model or a lifestyle model? To help you do this, we have a specific resource available. This episode draws from our recent blog post, Retirement Reality Check, which you can find at SafeSimpleSound.com. Through our S3 approach development, we've created a downloadable PDF resource called the Retirement Assumptions Reality Check Guide. This free tool walks you through defining your big three inputs and helps you choose between the legacy and lifestyle models before you ever do the math. It is designed to be simple, actionable, and safe. You can find the link to this guide in the show notes of this episode or by visiting our website. If today's S3 insights resonate with your family's situation, we invite you to explore what financial planning could look like through our Safe, Simple Sound practice. We love helping families move from confusion to clarity. However, even if you never engage with our practice, you are now equipped with a capability that will serve you well. You understand that you are the architect of your assumptions. You understand that the number is just a result of your inputs. And you understand that by controlling the inputs, you can control the anxiety. That is the essence of Safe, Simple Sound planning, securing the inputs so the output takes care of itself. Thank you for listening. We look forward to helping you build a future that is safe, simple, and sound.